Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. I have combined all the videos in our onboarding screen design series into this single long video so that it is easy for you to follow. Now in this video, we are basically creating this onboarding screen from scratch using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. And then in the end, I will also show you how to add this to a Blogger website. And I will also leave the link of the source code in the description of this video. So let's get started. Alright, let me show you how it works. We can see that we have this button over here called Show Demo, and if I click on that, we have this pop-up displayed over here. So this is the onboarding screen, and this is basically a way for the user to understand how the website works. So here we can see we have some content displayed over here. We have the heading and we have some text over here, and we also have this image over here, and then we have this next button over here, and if I click on that, we go to the next step. And here on the top we can see that we have the progress bar. So this is the second step and we have one more step to go. So if I click on the next button, we go to the next step, and when we are in the last step, we have this text change to finish, and if I click on finish, it goes away, and that is the onboarding screen of your website. And we also have a skip button. So if I click on this show demo button, and if I go to the next screen, now here we are on the second screen, and if I click on skip, we go back to the website. So this is basically how our onboarding screen is gonna work. Now this is especially important for you if you have a website that provides a service, or if you have an online tool like loan calculator or color generator or things like that. You can use this onboarding screen to help the user understand how your website works. So let's get started. Alright, so here I have opened up this folder called onboarding screen, and I just opened it with VS Code. And then here we have this folder called images, and in that we have these 3 images which we're going to use in our design. So let's start by creating the necessary files. So let's click on new file, and we'll create an HTML file. I'll just name it index.html. Let's also create a CSS file. I'll just name it style.css. And we'll also create a JavaScript file. Let's name it main.js. Let's start with the index.html file. So here in VS Code you have the shortcut where you can just press exclamation and press tab, and you'll have this basic HTML5 code. Alright, here in the head tag, I'll just link our CSS file. So I'll just type link and press tab. And in the href, I'll just type style.css. And in the body, I'll just link the JavaScript file. So I'll just type script :src and press tab. And here in the src, I'll just type main.js. Alright, now let's start with the markup of our design. First of all, let's create this button over here. So for the button, I'll just create a button, and we'll give it a class of onboarding button. And here I'll just type show demo. Alright, let's open this in the browser and let's see how it looks. So I have this extension called live server installed in VS Code. So once you do that, you can just right click over here in the HTML and click on open with live server. And here we can see we have the button displayed over here. Alright, now let's create the overlay. So here we can see in our original design, if I click on this show demo button, we have this dark overlay over this web page, and on top of that we have this onboarding screen. And if I click on skip, we can see that the overlay is hidden. So let's create a division for that. I'll just create a division with the class of onboarding overlay. Right, now let's start with the actual content of the onboarding screen. So let's create a division with the class of onboarding container. And here I'll just create a division with the class of content for all the content. And the first thing we will have is the skip button. So let's create an anchor tag, and here I'll just type skip, and I'll also give it a class. So let's give it a class of skip btn. Right, now the next thing we will do is we'll create these dots over here. So for that, let's create a division with the class of dots, and in that we'll create divisions with the class of dot for each of the dot. So I'll just duplicate this 2 more times. And for the first dot, we will add a class called active so that it is highlighted over here. Right, now let's create a division with the class of steps, and in that we will have all the steps. So this is the first step. So for each of the step, we will have a division with the class of step. So let's create a division with the class of step. And the first thing we need to have over here is this image. So let's create a division with the class of image. And here I'll just add the image. So if we go back to our file browser, here in the images folder we have these 3 SVG images. So let's click on the first image and I'll just copy all of this code and let's paste it over here inside the image division, and I'll just fold this SVG. Alright, after the image we need to have the heading, so let's create an S3 for that, and here I'll just type step 1. You can add your own text over here, and then we need to have a paragraph, so let's create a paragraph tag, and I'll just copy this text and let's paste it over here. Alright, that's it with the first step. So let's copy this step division from here and let's paste it 2 more times over here, and we'll just change the heading and the images. So I'll just delete this SVG from here, and let's go back to our images folder and let's select the second SVG, and I'll just copy this code and let's paste it over here. And then for the heading we will just type step 2, and let's delete the third SVG, and let's go back to our images folder. Let's select the third SVG from here and let's copy this code and let's paste it over here. Now the last thing we need to do over here in this HTML is to add the next button. So we will add that outside the steps division. So this is the step division, and before that we have the steps division. So let's go outside to divs, and here let's create the next button. So let's create a button and let's give it a class of next btn, and here I'll just type next. Right now let's go to our design, and we can see that all the elements are displayed over here. We have the show demo button, we have the skip button, we have the images, the heading, the text, and we also have the next button. So that's basically it with the HTML of the onboarding screen. Right here in the HTML I have already linked the style.css file over here. So let's go to our style.css file and let's start with our CSS. The first thing we will style is this button. So if we go back to our index.html file, here we can see for the button we have this class of onboarding button. So let's target that. Here I'll just type onboarding button. And first of all, let's give it a padding of 12 pixels top and bottom and 32 pixels left and right. And we will give it a font size of 18 pixels. And we'll also set the font weight to bold. And let's set the background color of this button to E63946. And let's remove the border. So I'll just have border none. And let's set the color of the text to white. And we'll also add cursor to pointer. So when we hover over this, we have this cursor. So the design of the button is complete. Now let's start designing the rest of the elements. First of all, let me add box sizing of border box to all the elements so that we have the correct width and height for all the elements. So here we will target the onboarding container division and also all the other elements inside this division. So here I'll just type onboarding container, comma, onboarding container, asterisk. So this will select all the elements inside the onboarding container division, and we'll set the box sizing to border box. Alright, now the next thing we will do is we will reduce the height and the width of these images. So the images are inside this division with the class of image. So let's go back to our style.css file, and here I'll just type onboarding container, image, and in that we have the SVG. So I'll just type SVG over here, and let's set the height of the image to 150 pixels, and we'll set the width of the image to 100%. And we'll also add a margin of 32 pixels top and bottom and 0 for left and right. Right now the next thing we will do is we will style the overlay. So if we go back to our index.html file, here we can see we have this division with the class of onboarding overlay. So if you go back to our original design, and if I click on this show demo button, we can see we have this dark overlay behind this onboarding screen. So let's style that. So let's go to our style.css file, and let's target the onboarding overlay division. First of all, we'll set the background color to RGBA, and we'll set it to 0, 0, 0, and for the opacity I'll just type 0.4, and let's set the position to fixed, and we'll set the left position to 0 and the top position to 0, and let's set the height to 100 viewport height, and let's set the width to 100%. So now we can see we have this dark overlay. Now we don't want to display this overlay by default, so by default we will set the opacity to 0. So I'll just type opacity 0, and when we click on the show demo button we will display the overlay, but right now we can see that we cannot click on the show demo button. So for that we have to set the pointer events of this overlay to none, and now we'll be able to click on the button. Alright, now when we click on this button we're going to add a class called active to this onboarding overlay. So here I'll just type onboarding overlay dot active, and here I'll just set the opacity back to 1, and we'll also add smooth transition. So I'll just type transition and set it to all 400 milliseconds ease. Alright, now let's go back to our HTML and let's add the class active over here for the overlay, and now we can see that the overlay is displayed over here. Alright, let's go back to our style.css file and let's continue styling this. Now let's style this content. So if you go back to our index.html file, here we can see we have this division with the class of onboarding container, and in that we have this division with the class of content. So let's target this. So here I'll just type onboarding container content. First of all, let's set the background color to white. Now the color is not being added because we don't have the correct z index for the onboarding container. So here I'll just type onboarding container, and let's set the z index to, let's say, 300. And if you go over here to the overlay, we can see that we have set a position of fixed. So we need to have some position for this onboarding container. So here also I'll just set the position to fixed, and now we can see we have this background color. Now the next thing we will do over here is set the font family to Roboto. So I'll just type font family, Roboto, and sans serif. And let's set the left position to 50%, and let's set the top position to 50% so that it is in the center. So right now it starts from the center, so we have to move this 50% of itself to the left and the top. So for that we have to type transform translate, and we have to type negative 50% for the x-axis and negative 50% for the y-axis. Right now it is in the center. Now let's also add some box shadow. So I'll just type box shadow, and let's set the values to 0, 4 pixels, 40 pixels, negative 8 pixels, RGBA, 0, 0, 0, and 0.4. Right now the next thing we will do over here is we will set a max width for this content. So I'll just type max width, and let's set it to 300 pixels, and we'll also add a padding of 24 pixels. Alright, now let's position all these steps one next to the other. So let's go back to our index.html file, and here we can see we have this division with the class of steps, and in that we have this division with the class of step for each of the steps. So let's target this steps division. Here I'll just type onboarding container steps, and let's set the display to flex. Now we can see all these steps are one next to the other. Now we need to display just one step at a time, so we need to increase the width of the steps division to 3 times the width of its container. So here we have to type width, and we have to set it to 300%. And now we can see we have the correct width for all these steps. Right now let's style all the other elements. So first of all, let's style this S3. So here we can see we have this S3 over here. So let's target that. Here I'll just type onboarding container S3, and first of all let's set the margin to 0, and let's set the font size of the heading to 32 pixels, and let's text align it to the center. So I'll just type text align center. Right now let's style this paragraph. So here we can see in the index.html file we have this paragraph tag. So here I'll just type onboarding container P, and let's set the line height to 1.8. Right now let's style this button. So if you go back to our original design, we can see for the button we have this full width for the button, and since we have added a padding for this container division, we cannot have full width for this button. So let's go back over here to this content division, and we will change the padding to just padding top, and we will add the padding over here for the S3 and the paragraph. So I'll just type padding 0 for top and bottom and 32 pixels left and right. And we will do the same for the paragraph. I'll just type padding 0 32 pixels. Right now let's style the button. So let's type onboarding container. And for the button we have this button with the class of next btn. So let's target that. Here I'll just type next btn. And let's set the width to 100%. And let's set the padding to 16 pixels top and bottom and 32 pixels left and right. Or maybe we can increase it to 18 pixels. Right now let's set the font size to 16 pixels. And let's set the font weight to bold. And we'll remove the border, so I'll just type border none. And we'll set the cursor to pointer. And we will add a background color of 1D3557. And let's set the color of the text to white. We'll also set the text transform to uppercase. Right, that's it with the button. Now let's style this skip button. So for the skip button we have this anchor tag with the class of skip btn. So let's target that. Here I'll just type onboarding container skip btn. Now we'll position this button relative to this onboarding container division. So here I'll just type position absolute. And let's set the top position to 8 pixels. And let's set the right position to 16 pixels. And let's set the font size to 14 pixels. And let's set the font weight to bold. And we'll also set the text transform to uppercase. And let's set the color of the text to 636363. So that's it with the skip button. Now let's design these dots over here. So for the dots we have created this division with the class of dots. And in that we have these divisions with the class dot. So let's target them. So here I'll just type onboarding container dot. And let's set the width of the dot to 10 pixels and the height to 10 pixels. And let's set a background color of db. And let's set border radius of 50% so that we have round shape. And now we can see we have these 3 dots over here. Let's also add the active dot. So for the first dot we have a class of active. So let's target that. Here I'll just type onboarding container dot active. And let's set the background color to 222. So this is the active dot. Now let's position this over here in the center. And we also want it to be one next to the other. So let's target the container division, which is dots. So I'll just type onboarding container dots. And let's set the display to flex. And justify content to the center. And we'll also have a gap of 8 pixels. And now we can see that the dots look alright. Now the last thing we will do is we will hide all the other steps besides the current step. So let's go back over here to the content. And here we will add a property called overflow of hidden. And now everything outside this content will be hidden. Alright, that's basically it with the design of the onboarding screen. Right here in our HTML file, we can see that we have already linked our JavaScript file over here. Now before getting started with the JavaScript, let's add some classes to the style.css file. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a class called active to this onboarding container when we want it to be displayed. And we're going to remove the active class from the onboarding container when we don't want it to be displayed. So let's go to our style.css file. And if we scroll down, here we can see we have the styles for the onboarding container. So what we're going to do is by default we will set the position of this onboarding container a little lower than default. So here for the y-axis, let's add a calc function. So I'll just type calc. And here we'll type negative 50% plus, let's say, 15 pixels. Right now we can see it has moved a little bit to the bottom. Let's move it a little bit more. So let's type 25 pixels. And we will also set the opacity to 0. So I'll just type opacity 0. And we'll also add a transition so that we will have smooth animation. So I'll just type transition. And let's set it to all 100 milliseconds is. And here we will type onboarding container dot active. So when we have the active class, we're going to reset the transform and also the opacity. So I'll just copy this line of code and paste it down here. And I'll just bring it back to negative 50%. I'll just remove this calc function from here. And we'll also set the opacity back to 1. Alright, now let's go back to our index.html file, and in the onboarding container, let's add the class active. And now we can see that the onboarding container is being displayed over here. And if we remove the active class, it is hidden. And we have the same for the onboarding overlay as well. So we have already added the active class. So here we can see for the active class, we are adding the opacity to 1. So if we remove the active class from the onboarding overlay, we can see that the overlay is hidden. Alright, now we're going to add and remove the active class using JavaScript when we click on this onboarding button. So let's reference these 3 elements in our JavaScript. We need to reference the onboarding button, the onboarding overlay, and the onboarding container. So let's go to our main.js file and let's type const onboarding button equals document.querySelector, and here I'll just type onboarding button. And the next thing we will reference is the onboarding container. So let's type const onboarding container equals document.querySelector onboarding container. And let's also reference the onboarding overlay. So let's type const onboarding overlay equals document.querySelector and onboarding overlay. Alright, now let's add an event listener to this onboarding button. So let's type onboarding button dot add event listener, and let's listen for the click event, and here we'll create an arrow function. Now here we need to add the active class to this onboarding container and the onboarding overlay. So let's type onboarding container dot class list dot add, and here we'll just type active. And let's also type onboarding overlay dot class list dot add, and here let's type active. Right, now let's test it out. So let's click on this button, and now we can see that the onboarding container is being displayed over here. Now the next thing we will do is when we click on the skip button, we want to hide this onboarding container. So let's reference the skip button. So for the skip button, we have this anchor tag with the class of skip btn. So let's target this. So here I'll just type const skip button equals document.querySelector onboarding container skip btn, and let's add an event listener for the skip button. So I'll just type skip btn dot add event listener, and here we'll just type click, and let's create an arrow function over here, and I'll just copy these 2 lines of code and paste it over here, and instead of add, I'll just type remove. Right, now let's test it out. So let's click on this show demo button, and we have the onboarding screen displayed over here. And let's click on the skip button, and it is hidden. So everything is working alright. I think we need to reduce the transition time for the overlay. So let's go back over here to style.css, and for the onboarding container, we have set a transition duration of 100 milliseconds. So let's add the same over here for the overlay. So just have 100 milliseconds. Now let's test it out, and we can see everything works alright. Alright, now the next thing we will do is we will add the functionality for the next button. So let's go to the original design, and let's click on this button. And here we can see we have this next button, and if I click on that, we go to the next step. So we are basically changing the position of the steps. So if you go over here to our CSS, and if you go to steps, here we can see we have set the width to 300%. And here for the content, if I just remove the overflow hidden from here, we can see that the next step is displayed over here on the right. Now we need to position this over here to the left so that the second step is displayed over here. And when we click on the next button, we need to position it even more to the left so that the third step is displayed over here. Now for that, the first thing we need to do is we need to get the width of this single step over here. So we need to reference 2 things from this HTML. So if you go back to our HTML file, here we can see we have this division with the class of steps. So we need to reference this so that we can move it to the left. And we also need to reference the step division inside the steps division, because we need to get the width of this step division so that we can move it in the correct position. And then lastly, we also need to reference this next button. So let's reference all of this in our JavaScript. Let's go over here to the main.js file and let's type const steps equals document dot query selector all. Now here we are using query selector all because we want to select multiple steps. So here I'll just type onboarding container step. So this will store all the steps inside this steps constant. Now let's reference the container division, which has a class of steps. So I'll just name it steps container. So I'll just type const steps container equals document dot query selector, and here we'll just type onboarding container steps, and then we also need to reference the next button. So let's type const next btn equals document dot query selector onboarding container next btn. Right now let's write the code for the next button. So the first thing we will do is we'll create a variable for storing the position. So let's create a variable called step position, and by default we will set it to 0. Right now let's add an event listener for this next button. So here I'll just type next btn dot add event listener, and here I'll just type click, and let's create an arrow function over here. Now what we need to do over here is that we need to move the steps container to the left, and first of all let's get the width of the single step. So here we can see we have already referenced the steps, so all the step divisions are inside the steps constant. So let's get the width of one of the steps. So here I'll just type steps, and I'll just select the first step, and to get the width we can use offset width. And what we will do is we will add this width to this step position. So here I'll just type step position plus equals steps 0 dot offset width. Now the next thing we need to do is move the steps container to the left with this position right here. So let's type steps container dot style dot transform equals translate x, and here we need to add the variable. So I'll just use backticks for this, and here I'll just type negative, and let's add this step position variable over here. So I'll just type dollar symbol, and in parentheses we will type step position, and then we need to type pixels. Right now this should move the steps container to the left and display the next step. So let's test it out. Let's click on the show demo button, and let's click on the next button, and here we can see we have the second step displayed over here. Let's click on the next button once again, and now we have the third step displayed over here. Now we'll also add a transition. So let's go back to our style.css file, and here for the steps I'll just type transition of all to 400 milliseconds is. Right now let's test it out. So let's click on the show demo button, and let's click on the next button, and we have the transition for the next step, and everything is working alright. Now the next thing we will do is when we are on the last step, we need to change the text of next to finish. So let's go back to our main.js file, and we'll keep track of the steps displayed over here. So what we'll do is we'll create a new variable, and let's name it current step, and by default we will set it to 0. And whenever we click on the next button, we need to increment the current step variable. So here I'll just type current step plus plus, so this will increment it by 1. Now here we'll create an if condition. So let's type if, and we will check whether the current step is the last step. So let's type current step equals steps, which is this constant with all the steps, and here we'll type dot length, and we also need to type -1 because arrays start from 0. Now this if condition will let us know whether we are on the last step. So if we are on the last step, then whatever is written over here inside this block will be executed. So here we'll just type next btn dot inner html equals, and I'll just set it to finish. Right now let's test it. So let's click on the show demo button, and let's click on the next button, and now let's click on the next button, and here we can see we have this text finish for the last step. Now the next thing we will do is we will add the code for these dots. So we need to change the active state of the dots to the next dots when we go to the next steps. So if you go back to our index.html file, here we can see we have this division with the class of dots, and in that we have these divisions with class dot, and for the first one we have a class of active. Now when we go to the next step, we need to add the active class to the next dot. So first of all, let's go to the style.css file and let's go to the dots. And here for the dot, I'll also add a transition so that we will have smooth animation. So just type transition all 400 milliseconds is. Alright, now let's go back to our main.js file and let's reference the dots. So here just type const dots equals document.querySelector all, and here we'll just type onboarding container dot. Alright, now let's go to the code for the next button, and here we will add the code for the dots. So I'll just type dots, and here in square brackets we need to add the index of the dot that we need to have the active class for. So what we will do is we will use this current step variable because it changes from 0 through the length of the steps. So let's type current step, and here I'll just type dot class list dot add, and we will add a class of active. Alright, now let's click on the show demo button and let's click on the next button and let's see whether the dot is changing to the next dot. So let's click on next button, and now we can see we have the active class for the next dot. Let's click on the next button once again, and we have the active class for the third dot. Now we need to remove the active class from the other dots when we have this new active class. So here, before adding the active class, I'll just remove the active class from all the other dots. So let's type dots dot for each to loop through all the dots. So for each of the dot, I'll just call it d, and I'll just create an arrow function over here, and I'll just type d dot class list dot remove, and here I'll just type active. Now this will remove the active class from all the dots before adding the new active class. So let's test it out. Let's click on this show demo button and let's click on the next button, and we have the dot for the next step, and let's click on the next button and we have the third dot active. So everything is working alright. Alright, now the last thing we need to do is when we click on the finish button, we need to hide this onboarding container and the overlay. So let's add an if condition over here. So here I'll just type if, and I'll just type current step is greater than or equal to steps dot length. So this if condition will tell us whether the steps are over. So here I'll just type onboarding container dot class list dot remove active, and onboarding overlay dot class list dot remove active. And we also need to reset the current step variable to 0. Alright, now let's test it out. So let's click on the show demo button and let's click on the next button and next and finish, and we can see that the onboarding container has disappeared. And let's click on the show demo button once again, and here we can see that the onboarding container is being displayed over here, but we don't have the steps displayed over here because we don't have the correct position of the steps. And here we can see we also have the text finish displayed over here. So we will fix all of that. So what we will do is I just remove these 2 lines of code from here inside the onboarding button event listener. So I'll just cut these 2 lines of code, and we'll create a function called init, and in that we will add all the lines of code for resetting all the values. So here I'll just create a function called init. First of all, let's paste the 2 lines of code, and the next thing we need to do is set the current step to 0, and then we need to set the step position to 0, and we also need to set the position of the steps container to the step position. So let's copy this line of code from here and let's paste it over here. And we'll also set the text of the next button. So I'll just type next btn.inner HTML equals, and here I'll just type next. Alright, now let's test it out. So let's click on the show demo button, and we have the first step displayed over here. Let's click on the next button, and we have the second step, and the dot is also in the correct position. Let's click on the next button, and we have the third step displayed over here, and we also have the dot active for the third step. And let's click on finish, and now let's click on show demo, and we have the first step displayed over here again. But we can see we had the animation for the step, so we transitioned from step 3 to step 1. So we don't want that to happen when we start our demo. So what we will do is here, when we are on the last step, what we will do is we will unset the transition. So I'll just type steps container dot style dot transition equals unset. And what we will do is we'll just copy this line of code, and I'll just paste it down here, and we will add the transition back over here. So I'll just type all 400 milliseconds is. Now this is for stopping the animation for the last step. So let's copy this line of code, and we'll also paste it in the init. So I'll just paste it right here. Alright, now let's test it out. So let's click on the show demo button, and we have the first step displayed over here. Let's click on the next button, and we have the second step. Let's click on the next button, we have the third step, and let's click on the finish button, and we can see that it goes back. Let's click on the show demo button once more, and we have the first step displayed over here. So everything is working alright. Let's click on the next button, and now let's click on the skip button, and let's see whether we go back to the first step. Let's click on the show demo button, and we are going back to the first step, but the dot is active on the second step. So what we'll do is let's go down over here to the next button code, and let's copy the code for the dot. So I'll just copy these lines of code, and let's paste it over here inside the init. Right, now let's test it out. So let's click on the show demo button, and we have the first step. Let's click on the next button, and we are on the second step. Let's click on the skip button, and let's click on the show demo button once again, and here we can see we are back in the first step, and even the dot is active in the correct step. So everything is working alright. So that's basically how you create an onboarding screen for your website using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Here I'm in the dashboard of my Blogger website, and we can add the onboarding screen inside a post or a page. Let's add it inside a new post. So let's click on new post. Now onboarding screens are basically added to services that you already have. So for example, if you have a color generator service, you can add an onboarding screen to that page so that the user can understand how your page works. But for now, I'll just show you how to add this to a new post. So here for the title, I'll just type our service. Now when you're adding this onboarding screen to your existing service, there may be a lot of code by default over here. So what you have to do is first of all go to the HTML view. So you can click on this button and click on HTML view, and then find the place where you want the button to be. So you want to have this button over here for the onboarding screen. So find the place in the code where you want the button to be positioned, and then click over there and paste the code over there. Alright, let's go to the source code, and here we can see this is the HTML. So you can copy and paste the HTML into your post. Now if you want to change some of these things over here, you can go ahead and do that. So this is the text for the button. So here we can see we have this show demo text. You can change the text over here. And then if you scroll down, we can see the text for the skip button, and then here we can see we have the content. So this is the heading for the first step. So you can change this to whatever you want, and you can also add your own content over here in place of this paragraph. And then here's the image. So this is an SVG file. So you can go ahead and download any SVG you want and paste it over here. If you have an image, you can just create an IMG tag and paste the link of the image over here. Now if you are adding an IMG tag, you have to go over here to the style.css file, and you have to change this SVG to IMG so that the styles can be applied to your image. And in the same way, you have the second step, so you can change the image, the heading and this paragraph, and the same for the third step. And you can add more steps by just copying this step division and pasting it down over here and changing the text. And if you want to delete one of the steps, you can just delete this division of the class step. And then lastly, we have this button with the text next. And if you go back to our onboarding screen, and if I click on show demo, and if I click on the next button, here we can see we have this finish text for the last step. So if you want to change this text, you can just go to the main.js file, and here if you scroll down we can see that we have this if condition over here. You can just change this text to whatever you want. Alright, let's start by copying the code. So let's go to our index.html file, and let's copy the HTML. So I'll just start from here and all the way till the end of the division, and let's copy this and paste it over here inside our post. Alright, so that's it with the HTML. Now you can add the CSS. So for the CSS you can just add it anywhere you want. So I'll just add it at the top. So I'll just create a style tag, and let's go to our style.css file, and let's copy everything from here, and let's paste it over here inside the style tag. And let's scroll down and let's add the JavaScript. So I'll just add it at the end. So after the end of the HTML, I'll just create a script tag, and let's go back to our source code, and let's go to the main.js file, and let's copy everything from here, and let's paste it over here, and let's click on publish and confirm. Right, our post has been published. So let's click on view, and here we can see we have the button. So let's click on this show demo button, and we can see that we have the onboarding screen displayed over here. But here we can see that this element is being displayed over here because the overlay of our design doesn't have the correct z index. So let's fix that. And we also need to fix the color of this text. So in our design we have black color, so let's change the color and let's change the z index of the overlay. So let's go back to our post, and let's open this post, and let's scroll down, and here we can see we have the overlay. So here I'll just add a z index, and let's set it to 200. And if you scroll down we can see we have the styles for the S3. This is the heading. So I'll just set the color of the text to white. Alright, now let's click on update. Alright, now let's go back to our post, and let's refresh this page, and let's click on show demo button, and now we have the black color displayed over here. And if you scroll down we can see that we have the correct z index. So our onboarding screen is above all the other elements, so everything looks alright. Let's click on the skip button, and we can see that it is hidden. Let's click on the show demo button, and let's click on the next button, and everything is working alright. Now the last thing I will show you is how to display the onboarding screen by default when you load the page. So for that, let's go back to our post, and let's go to the JavaScript. And if we scroll up, we can see that in our JavaScript we have this function with the name of init. So if we call this function, then our onboarding screen will be displayed. So let's call the function right here. So I'll just type init, and let's click on update. Alright, now let's go back to our post, and let's refresh this page. And here we can see that we have the onboarding screen displayed over here when the page loads. And then we can click on the next buttons or click on the skip button. And we can also click on this button to show the onboarding screen. Now if you load this page once again, we can see that the onboarding screen is displayed once again. Now we don't want to display this onboarding screen every time the page loads, so this can be distracting for the user. So what we will do is we just display this onboarding screen once for a user. So for that we will use local storage in the browser. So for that, let's go back to our JavaScript, and let's go to the init function, and here I'll just add a local storage. So a local storage is basically a space in the browser where it can store some data. So here I'll just type local storage dot set item, and here in parentheses you have to add a key and a value pair. So for the key I'll just type onboarding displayed, and for the value I'll just type true. Now let's update this, and let's go back to our post. And first of all, let me just show you the local storage. So let's right click over here and click on inspect, and you have to go over here to application. If you don't find this, you can just click on this button and go to application, And here in application you can find the websites. So our website is livebloggerofficial.blogspot.com. So let's click on this website. And right now we can see that we don't have any local storage displayed over here. Now let's refresh this page. And now let's check whether the local storage is added. So let's go to applications. And here we can see we have this local storage called onboarding displayed, and it is set to true. Now this data is stored in the browser with this website. So even if you reload this page, this data will be still there. So what we can do is we can just check whether we have the local storage. So let's scroll down, and here instead of just calling the init function, we'll just add it inside an if condition. So let's type if, and let's add this inside curly braces. And here I'll just type local storage dot get item, and here in double quotes I'll just type onboarding displayed. Now what we want to do is we want to display the onboarding screen only when we don't have the local storage. Now if we have the local storage, then it means that the onboarding screen was displayed. So here we have to add exclamation point so that this whole condition is negated. So now this init function will be called only when we don't have the onboarding displayed local storage available in the website. So let's click on update. And first of all, let's remove the local storage. So I'll just go over here to inspect and go to application, and I'll just delete this local storage. Right now let's refresh this page, and here we can see that the onboarding screen is displayed over here. Let's skip, and now let's refresh this page, and now we can see that the onboarding screen is not being displayed because we already have the local storage added to our browser. So in this way the onboarding screen will only be displayed when the user goes to the website for the first time. And now if we click on the show demo button, we can see that the onboarding screen is displayed over here. But if we reload the page, we don't have the onboarding screen displayed. Now let's open this in an incognito window, and let's see whether the onboarding screen is displayed over here. So I'll just copy this. Now here I have opened this incognito window, so let's paste the link over here and let's open the website. And here we can see we have the onboarding screen displayed over here because this is the first time. And now let's reload this page. And now we don't have the onboarding screen displayed. So that's basically how you add an onboarding screen to your Blogger website. Alright, so that's it for this video. I will leave the link of the source code and also the design video in the description of this video. And if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below. And if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.